Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hip Drop Podcast. Been a little while since Owen and I recorded. Kind of have to record later in the week. We're recording on a Saturday. But nonetheless, we have a very awesome show for you today. If you love mock drafts, you're going to love today's episode because what we have on the pipe coming down the pipeline is we're doing a top 10 mock draft, just the first 10 picks. I will have the odd picks. Owen will have the even picks. And then after we do a quick mock draft, we're just going to briefly discuss the Dallas Cowboys deciding to franchise tag George Pickens. So barring a trade, he will be back in Dallas, but we'll give our thoughts there. Then the New York Jets and Tennessee Titans made a interesting trade. Nothing significant or big, but it will be interesting just to talk about those two teams because
first trade of the offseason.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice to get to talk about two of the lesser teams in the NFL. They make one move, so we can just get two birds stoned at once. And then finally, we'll just talk about something a little bit more off the beaten path. Just will the NFL be back to normal next year? Kind of a weird year in a lot of ways this past season, but nonetheless, I'm just going to get started. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to do a very quick top 10 mock draft. And Owen, just let me know if you can see. Let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator?
That I can. I absolutely can.
Perfect.
So, like Lucas said, he has the odds. He's got Raiders, Arizona, Giants, Washington, and then he gets the Chiefs because, of course, our Chiefs in the top 10 this year because they sucked last year. Meanwhile, I have the Jets, Tennessee, Cleveland, New Orleans, and Cincinnati. So, Lucas, I think it's a pretty clear first overall pick for the Raiders. Who you got going to Vegas this year?
I am going to go with Carson Beck. No, the quarterback who beat Carson Beck in the national championship, Fernando Mendoza. This is a pretty easy pick. That's why I was kind of a little bummed I got the odds because there's no doubt about this pick. Mendoza is not some sort of like generational talent, like, oh, he's going to come in and be an MVP in his second year like Drake May, but he's still a high quality prospect. A lot of people have compared him to Jared Goff with better mobility. I don't know if he has the accuracy of Jared Goff, but I think he has a little bit better arm strength as well. So people are down on him, but like I think he's certainly worth the first overall pick. Nothing elite, but it's not a token first overall pick. We're like, hey, like it's the Raiders have no other options. I think the Raiders are very happy with what they get out of Fernando Mendoza. I personally think he's going to be a slightly more talented Kirk Cousins, but when Kirk Cousins is at his best. So I think
not current Kirk Cousins.
I think he'll peak around the 8th to 10th best quarterback. Maybe have like a Matt Ryan type MVP year mixed in, but like I think he's certainly worth the first overall pick. And the Raiders hopefully are going to solve their quarterback issues. Hopefully for their fans, but for us Chiefs fans, we hope
not for us. Yeah, we hope Fernando Mendoza stinks. Yeah, we hope he sucks. But for his sake, I hope he's good. Matt Ryan was actually my comp for him. Just watching him play, he's more athletic than Matt Ryan ever was. But I mean, tall, 6'6", good arm, very good mobility. I think he's a legitimately good prospect. I think he's a better prospect than Cam Ward was last year. And Cam Ward definitely showed some promise as a rookie. But I think this is the easiest, most slam dunk first overall pick since Trevor Lawrence. Because in the Caleb Williams draft, you also had Drake May and Jaden Daniels. Last year, there was a debate of like, do you just take best player available? I think this is an easy one for the Raiders. They need a quarterback in the worst way. Geno Smith is not the answer. Fernando Mendoza is the guy here. So I have the New York Jets. The Jets, of course, 3-14 last year. This is a bad year. I have the second overall pick because this is really only one legitimately good quarterback prospect in the draft, and he's off the board. So I think I have the Jets taking Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese, number 2 overall. So Lucas will go down there. The Jets defense was absolutely atrocious last season. They did not get a single interception. Obviously, they need a quarterback. Justin Fields is terrible. Brady Cook is Brady Cook. Shout out Mizzou, but like he's not an NFL quarterback. But you're not going to get one in the draft. Their best bet is a low-risk free agent, whether it's like Marcus Mariota or Kirk Cousins, assuming he's released by Atlanta, or a trade for a Kyler Murray. But I think this is the guy that many people have going there. I think he fits Aaron Glenn's defensive scheme well. So I think Arvell Reese is the move here for the Jets.
Yeah, I agree. I think this would be the pick I would make as well. Arvell Reese, kind of a lazy comparison because it seems like there's a prospect every year that's compared to this guy, but a little bit of Micah Parsons in him, where he started off as an off-ball linebacker and then is going to convert to a pass rusher. But I think he projects very well. I think he's a slightly lesser prospect than Abdul Carter last year, but like in that same vein, that I think he's going to translate very well. He needs to get a little bit stronger in his upper body, and he still will need to develop as a pass rusher. I don't think he's a plug and play pass rusher that'll give you 8 sacks right off the bat. I think he'll need some development. Kind of screams like a guy who's going to be a lot better in December than he is in September. But nonetheless, I think it's worth the second overall pick, and he has the potential to be a blue chip talent. And the Jets just need better players, but they also need more blue chip talent because right now they have Garrett Wilson, a couple of tackles, but really nothing on defense since they traded Sauce Gardner and Quentin Williams.
Right. So Arvell Reese could give them that. All right, Lucas, who the Cardinals got?
This is kind of a tough pick because the Cardinals, what they really need, I just don't think is worth the third overall pick. As you can see, their needs on the PFF simulator are quarterback. I don't think Ty Simpson will go 3. I wouldn't pick Jeremiah Love here if I was Arizona. They need a rebuild, so I don't think taking a running back is in their best interest. And I just will not take a tackle here at 3. I would have taken Arvell Reese if I was Arizona, but I'm going to go with David Bailey. A little bit of an off-the-board pick, but I think the Cardinals still need pass rush. I understand that they paid Josh Sweat. They drafted Walter Nolan last year, but I just think the Cardinals need more. They just need to draft best player available, and I think David Bailey will be a good fit in Arizona's new system. I just don't think Ruben Bain is the best fit here for him. I don't think they should take a safety at 3. Don't think they should take a running back or a pure off-ball linebacker. So I just think they need to go with the best premium prospect remaining that I think is the best fit, and I think that's David Bailey.
Very interesting, because a lot of people thought the Cardinals tried to improve their offensive line. Look, the Cardinals have quarterback questions. There's some smoke that Malik Willis could end up there, considering their head coach is the brother of Malik Willis's former coach. And look, this is interesting because Josh Sweat, despite the fact that the Cardinals were really one of the more disappointing teams in the league last year, Josh Sweat was good last year. Like, he was worth the contract. I believe he had like 11 sacks. So like the Cardinals' defensive front is a rare strength of their team. But David Bailey, I get the process of going best player available. It's not what I would do, but I mean, that's what Lucas would do. So Lucas knows more about the draft than I ever will. So next up, we have the Tennessee Titans. That's the team who had the first overall pick last year. They do not need a quarterback. So they were 3-14 in 2025. For the Titans, look, their offensive line last year sucked. Cam Ward was among one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league. There were multiple occasions where he had no time to throw. For that reason, I have them taking the University of Miami offensive tackle, Francis Mauigoa. I probably completely butchered his last name, but I think the Titans really need to improve that offensive line. Mike Borgonzi mentioned, I believe last year at the Combine, second-year GM of the Titans, they need to build their team through the trenches, and I think now Mauigoa is the best available offensive tackle. I don't think he's a blue chip prospect like an Armand Membo was last year, or certainly what I'm trying to think of past, or like what Jake Long was coming out in 2008 when he was the first overall pick. But he's a good prospect. He's a legitimate. Joe Alt, yeah, of course, him as well, more recent. But I do think he's a legitimately good player, and I do think he will help stabilize a really weak position for the Titans.
Yeah, I don't mind this pick for Tennessee. My only question is Maui Noah, I think that's how you say his name, he was purely a right tackle in college, and they just drafted J.C. Latham a couple years ago, who played pretty well for them last year as their right tackle. So I wonder if they're planning on flipping him over to the left side and he'll become their left tackle, because I don't know if they want to do that to J.C. Latham after a couple years in the NFL. But I think Maui Noah has a very high ceiling, a bit of a project. Wouldn't have been my pick, but it's one where I certainly would get it if Tennessee made it on draft night. So next up, New York Giants up at 5. Kind of tough. I don't want to take I don't want to take the other big offensive tackle here. I'm blanking on his name out of Utah, Spencer Fano. I just would not take him at 5th overall. I don't think they need another pass rusher, so I'm not going to take Ruben Bain. They're not going to take Jeremiah Love. I think I'm going to have them take Caleb Downs.
Okay.
I think Caleb Downs is a really, really strong safety prospect. I don't think he's like a generational talent by any means, but I think he's kind of on the same level as Kyle Hamilton. More of an in-the-box safety. I don't think he's going to be a pure center fielding, ball hawking safety like Ed Reed was, but certainly going to be an asset kind of like he might be a little bit tiny bit like Eric Berry, but like I think in this draft, Caleb Downs is the right pick here. In past drafts, I think you don't take a safety at 5, but a lot of smart analysts would say, well, any year's draft is not like other year's draft. Meaning, like, I don't care if Caleb Downs wouldn't be worth the 5th overall pick in last year's draft or 2 years ago or next year. He's in this year's class, and I think he is worth the 5th overall pick. And I think the Giants just need more talent on defense that's not on the defensive line. Like, they drafted Deontay Banks a couple years ago. That didn't really work out at corner. I think just drafting a blue chip talent for that secondary is really going to pay dividends, given how much raw talent they have in the pass rush. And I think Caleb Downs will be a very, very good player, very high floor, relatively high ceiling. Not quite the slot didn't quite line up with their needs, but I think they're going to be very happy drafting another blue chip talent in Caleb Downs.
Yeah, look, I think Caleb Downs, I would argue, is the best player in this draft. Him and Love are the top 2 guys for me. You could certainly argue a Reese or a Bailey. And I think a lot of people compared him to Kyle Hamilton, and who coached Kyle Hamilton for the last 4 years? That would be the Giants' new head coach, one John Harbaugh. So this makes perfect sense. The Giants' secondary was a huge problem last year. They blew a bunch of late fourth quarter leads because they struggled to defend the pass. And I think Caleb Downs would be a big upgrade in this regard. All right, so the 6th overall pick is the Cleveland Browns. Last year it went 5-12. They have a new head coach. Todd Monken is now the man in charge after moving on from Kevin Stefanski. Look, the Browns, defensively, I think they're pretty set. They have a good defense. All their needs are on the offensive side of the football, and it starts with their offensive line. So I have another offensive tackle going off the board, and that is Utah offensive lineman Spencer Fano going to Cleveland here with the 6th overall pick. The Browns quite literally have no starting offensive lineman under contract right now. And look, the cupboard is bare in terms of offensive talent for the Browns. Obviously, quarterback is a huge question. The receivers are not good. It looks like David Njoku won't be there next year, although Harold Fannin looked like a good young tight end last season. But their offensive line which was once a strength, is now an issue. So they need to stabilize that a little bit. So I'm going to go with the best available offensive lineman there at 6.
Can you hear me?
You're frozen.
I
I
think
can hear you. You're good now. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Froze for a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if Spencer Fano is worth the 6th overall pick, but granted how desperate Cleveland is at offensive line, I don't really blame them if they did make this pick. If I were Cleveland's GM and I was purely just going off the board, I would have picked one of the wide receivers, but I don't really care that they have all their offensive linemen are free agents. Their offensive line sucked last year. So I don't think that's exactly a bad thing. I don't think it's exactly a bad thing, so they need a fresh start, but I think they could justify taking Fano at 6. I think he has a relatively high ceiling as a tackle. I think he was a right tackle in college. We get to check PFF. I think Caleb Loma, who will go at the end of the 1st round, was the left tackle. Yeah, he played right tackle exclusively in college. I think he's probably the right pick for Cleveland. Like, they wouldn't be the right pick for the Giants, so I don't really blame the Browns for going Fano 1 pick later if they decide to do that. Okay, Washington Commanders. They're kind of a team that needs like everything except for like tackle, quarterback. I think that's it. Like, you could really justify any pick here if you really want to.
Which is insane to say it. Insane to say it. Sorry to interrupt you, Lucas. That's crazy to say about a team that was in the NFC Championship game 13 months ago.
It's just nuts. I am actually still kind of looking over my pick because I'm down between 2 guys. And they're both on the defensive side of the ball, but they're both very different positions. Do I think I am actually just going to go? I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. I'm going to go with Mansour Delane, cornerback out of LSU.
Ooh, look at the water. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, a little bit of a different pick. For me, it was between him and Ruben Bain. I don't know if Dan Quinn is really going to be okay with Ruben Bain's short arm length, but I think he really should be. And Mansour Delane, I know that Dan Quinn runs a very zone-heavy defense, but I think Mansour Delane can be elite in zone coverage. I think he's a great man-to-man corner. Even if you're a zone defense, you need to have corners who could cover man-to-man every once in a while. And I don't know if Dan Quinn is going to be cool, like I said earlier, with Ruben Bain having very, very short arms. But maybe he is. I wouldn't blame them if they went Ruben Bain, but I'm going to pass on Bain, and I'm going to give them a true CB1. I know they have Marshawn Lattimore, but Marshawn Lattimore's probably cooked at this point. I think Mansour Dilling's a pretty safe pick. I don't know if he's ever going to be an All-Pro, but I think he's going to be a very, very, very good player, and I think the Commanders are not going to regret picking him at 7.
Yeah, look, the Commanders need defense. Like, that's their big offensively. Like, they have some talent. Like, obviously, they have Daniels coming back. They have, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who looked somewhat promising as a running back last year. They have some decent receivers. Their biggest issue is defense. Their defense, even the year they went to the championship game, was bad. Last year it was even worse. It was maybe the worst defense in football last year. So they need to completely load up on that side of the ball. So with the 8th pick is the New Orleans Saints, 6-11 in 2025. Really kind of exceeded expectations down the stretch last year. Look, Lucas, I'm going to break your heart. I'm going to break my own heart too. I think they do it. I have them taking Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love with the 8th overall pick for New Orleans, largely due to the fact that Alvin Kamara is pretty washed up at this point, has been for a few years, and they would like to support Tyler Shuck, who had a pretty promising rookie season. The Saints have a lot of needs. They're not a very talented roster, which is why they're picking 8th. But I think they're going to go best player available here, and many Chiefs fans, depending on what they do in free agency, will be devastated by this pick.
I'm not that devastated. I'm actually a little bit relieved because I think this board fell very well for the Chiefs. I didn't manipulate my picks at all to help the Chiefs. But I think the Saints, I think they could justify taking Jeremiah Love. I think he's a great prospect. I don't think the Saints are entering a rebuild. I think they're now still in the rebuild phase, but I think they're starting to ascend a little bit with Tyler Shuck. So I think they are a team that I think can justify a Love pick. Cleveland couldn't, not just because they have Judkins, but they're not in a position to take a running back. I don't think Arizona could have. I don't think the Jets could have. I don't think the Raiders could have, even though a couple of those teams have drafted running backs high. I think the Saints, it does make sense because they can win their division next year. So I think taking a running back will be okay because pure rebuilding teams cannot take running backs in the first round. That makes no sense, but I like the pick. Okay, next up. I have the Chiefs. They're my favorite team. This is really tough. It's between Ruben Bain and Carnell Tate. I don't think you can go wrong. I've been kind of going on the assumption that Bain would be gone by 9, but maybe with his sub 31-inch arms, teams will be scared off by that. Chiefs need a pass rusher. They also need a wide receiver. I think Carnell Tate would come in and day one be their best wide receiver, their most reliable wide receiver, because I don't know if Rashee Rice is ever going to play football for them again. I don't think he should, but whether he will is still just as big of a question. I don't care about the arm length. I think he's just so explosive. He's such a good football player. You could line him up outside. You could line him up inside. If he doesn't work on the outside because of the short arm length, being vulnerable against tackles that have longer arms, he just can't get good positioning, and he's just kind of vulnerable to power against tackles that can handle speed. I'm going to go with Ruben Bain.
Okay.
I think he's a defensive lineman who I think day one is going to be the second best pass rusher on the team after Chris Jones. I think he's very strong in both ends of the field. You see his PFF grades, 92 pass rush grades, and then an 86 run defense grade. Very strong prospect. Maybe some character flaws as well that will come to light potentially. But I think the Chiefs got to take a swing here. Even if he doesn't turn into a top 3 pass rusher in the NFL, given his arm length, if he can come in and be a very quality starting pass rusher day one and then develop into a high-end starter, even if it's not a Pro Bowler, I think the Chiefs are going to love this pick. And they also need a wide receiver and a running back. I think that they could very easily get a high-end wide receiver in the second round. Maybe not high-end, but a very good wide receiver at 40. And I think they can get another good running back at 40, if not plugging that hole prior to the draft and free agency.
Very interesting because, like I said, the Chiefs' edge rush is a huge need. They really struggled to get after the quarterback last season. I think they're going to try to make some changes on that front. So, look, Ruben Bain, prior to the arm length stuff coming out, was a consensus guy who was going to go in the top 5 or 6, a guy who would likely be gone by the time the Chiefs were picking. But I do think teams will be scared off by this. I do think he's very good. And if you're a Chiefs fan, given their struggles getting after the quarterback last year, it's hard to be upset by this one. All right. So the last one of the top 10, and Lucas and I will do a full round mock draft the night before the actual draft in a couple months. So obviously Carnell Tate is not a pick for the Bengals here because they clearly don't need receivers. I'm going to go with, I'm not just looking at the top of the board, I swear, but I'm going to go with Ohio State linebacker Sonny Styles going to the Cincinnati Bengals here at 10 because what do they need? Defense. Obviously, their defense is horrible once again. They need to just load up on that side of the ball as much as humanly possible. Now, the Bengals' history of drafting defense has been really, really bad the last handful of years. But Sonny Styles, I do think, is a legitimate blue chip prospect. Tested out really well at the combine, and I think he's best player available given what they need. So I have Sonny Styles going to the Cincinnati Bengals at 10.
I think that's a good pick. I don't care if he's an off-ball linebacker. So athleticism is off the charts. I think he's very smart. I think he's pretty good against the run, great in pass. I just think there's a chance he develops into a blue chip linebacker. Maybe not Luke Kuechly or Fred Warner, but maybe in that next group. The Bengals just need good defensive players. I just think there's no one else I would really pick here. Jamon McCoy has blue chip potential, but he didn't play football in 2025, so that's a bit of a risk. Caleb Hanks has off the charts athleticism. Reminds me a lot of Chris Jones, but maybe a little bit of a reach here. And then I just don't know if any other player I would take at 10th overall. So good job. There's a reason I haven't picked Sonny Styles yet, because as soon as I hit draft like I just did, it's going to roll through the rest of the picks. I forgot the Jets have another first round pick. And the Browns. So I'm just going to do a quick impromptu mock draft with the Jets and the Browns with these final two picks. Jets, we had them taking Arvell Reese. I'm going to have them take Jordan Tyson. I don't care if he's hurt. The Jets need pass catching talent after Garrett Wilson. The Jets are a team, I think, that can afford to take a swing on someone like Jordan Tyson with injury questions, because if he hits, he's going to be a true bona fide number one. So whoever their quarterback is in 2027, if Tyson stays healthy, he's going to be a great player. Cleveland Browns, I'm going to have them double dip on offensive line. I wouldn't blame them if they did. Just pick two players to plug holes on your offensive line immediately. And then Oluwasegun Ayinoue. I'm sorry, I'm going to learn to pronounce his name eventually when this NFL Stock Exchange podcast guys get to learn how to pronounce it properly. But he's going to be a day one, high-quality pass-protecting guard. And given how badly Cleveland needs to fix their offensive line, I wouldn't blame them for making that pick, because I just think that, the Browns are in such a deep hole right now. They just need to draft good players. If they have to draft two offensive linemen in the top 25, as long as those players are good, it's not really going to – I don't think people are really going to care. I wouldn't draft Ayanoue. I wouldn't reach for him, but I think if he's one of the best players on the board, I think you take him. And then with this mock draft, they solved their right tackle hole and their left guard hole. Still got to improve left tackle, center, and right guard, but at least you got two blue chip players on your offensive line. Okay, so just to re-summarize the mock draft, I took Fernando Mendoza at 1, pretty easy pick. Owen that with Arvell Reese, who is now emerging as probably the consensus best non-quarterback in the draft, or at least maybe the best player among premium positions. So removing safety, running back, and quarterback, and then, or not removing quarterback, but still not considering positional value. Number 3, I took David Bailey. I think he's going to be a very strong player. Needs to work against the run, though I think those struggles are overblown. I don't think he's a very complete prospect, but I think the Cardinals can justify taking him at 3. Then Owen took Francis Maui-Noah at 4 to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans need to protect Cam Ward. Certainly a valid pick. Caleb Downs, Giants need just better talent on defense that's not on the defensive line. So I think Caleb Downs will be a blue chip player for the Blue Men. So number 6, Spencer Fano. I think he's a very quality right tackle prospect. Maybe he could play on the left side if the Browns want to develop in that way. So everyone knows Cleveland needs offensive line, like I just spent time yapping about. Commanders taking Mansour Delaney. The Commanders just need cornerback talent. I don't care if they took Mikey Sanderstill 2 years ago and Trey Amos last year. Their secondary was horrible. Just you got to keep, and I think cornerback is certainly, I think, probably the second most valuable position on defense other than pass rusher. So I think Washington just needs to keep improving that defense. I think Delaney is worth the 7th pick. New Orleans Saints, Owen took Jeremiah Love. With Tyler Shuck looking like he's going to be a very good player, and the Saints maybe competing for the NFC South if the Bucs don't figure it out, or the Panthers take a step back, or the Falcons stay the Falcons. I think they could view themselves as a playoff team. So I think taking a running back in the first round is certainly a defendable position. I had the Chiefs taking Ruben Bain. It was between him and Carnell Tate. I don't care about the arm length. I think even if he has to slot inside a little bit on a few snaps to defend against that short arm length, I would certainly take him. I think he's going to be a very, very strong pass rusher for them. And then number 10, Owen took Sonny Styles, probably the best pure linebacker, off-ball linebacker in the draft. Oliver Reese is a better player than Sonny Styles, same defense, but I think Reese will transition to a pass rusher. So, and the Bengals just need defensive talent of any type, and I think Styles is probably the best defensive prospect on the board at that pick. And for the Bengals' offensive needs, there's not a player I would take at 10 because they don't need a wide receiver. There's no one else. And then some impromptu picks because I had to pick the teams. I couldn't pick the slots. I had the Jets taking Jordan Tyson. I could see them going wide receiver. It wouldn't shock me if they picked a receiver at 2. I don't think it's going to happen, but it wouldn't like blow my mind by any means. But I think if they have to stick at 16 and take a wide receiver, it has to be Jordan Tyson. I understand there's risk, but it's not like the Jets are a team that's looking to compete now. So where if the pick goes wrong, they're screwed. Like, I don't think the Jets 2026 season is going to hinge on Jordan Tyson being healthy or not. Like, they just need so much, so I think they can justify taking a big swing on a potential bona fide number 1 next to Garrett Wilson. And then I had Cleveland taking Olive Vega Ianoe. I botched that name, but the Browns just need offensive line. He's a strong pass protector, and that's pretty much it. So, Owen, do you have anything else to add about this mock draft before we transition to the second part of our show?
No, I think it looks pretty good. Obviously, it's still early. The draft is, like I said, it's in the latter part of April. So Lucas and I will have more draft talk over the next month, plus free agency talk, which is coming up, because that's what the offseason's about. But no, I think this is a good-looking mock draft. I'm not going to really react to the simmed picks because, Lucas and I didn't discuss those. But I think this is the top 10, which is what we did, looks pretty good in terms of filling those teams' needs. So, yeah, I mean, we will be filling out a couple more mock drafts as the offseason rolls on. And then, of course, we'll do a full all 32 first round mock draft the night before. So that about wraps it up for that part of the podcast. And then we have some other stuff to talk about. Not a whole lot. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I just think it's worth discussing. So, Lucas, we will start with George Pickens getting franchise tagged by the Dallas Cowboys. We will see if they give him a long-term deal, but all signs point to him being back in Dallas and possibly beyond, which is not surprising because George Pickens was outstanding last season. He had the best year of his career. I'm pulling up his numbers right now. So George Pickens last season had 93 catches for 1,429 yards and 9 touchdowns. He averaged 15.4 yards per reception. He and CeeDee Lamb helped form one of the better receiving tandems in football. So, while the Cowboys' team success wasn't great last year, I do think their trade for George Pickens paid off from a production standpoint, and this is not surprising. So, we'll see if Jerry Jones gets involved and embarrasses himself like he did in the Micah Parsons process and, the CeeDee Lamb process 2 years ago. But as of now, it looks like George Pickens, after a career season, will be back in Dallas in 2026 and potentially beyond if they agree on a long-term deal.
Yeah, I like this. I like this move for Dallas. I think ideally they work out a long-term deal. Paying 2 wide receivers and your quarterback isn't ideal, but I think after they made that trade for him last year, you can't justify letting him walk. I wouldn't hate it if they traded him. They tagged and traded him, got maybe a slightly better pick than they gave up last year. But in the end, given after they made that move last year, they had to tag him. They couldn't let him walk for nothing. So this is the right move. Pickens was a number 1 wide receiver last year. Like, you can make an argument just based on 2025 alone. He was a top 5 to 7 wide receiver in the sport. Whether he can remain consistent, it's kind of weird because we thought Dallas is a very unstable organization or not a serious organization, and George Pickens has a tendency to be a head case. We thought, there could be fireworks, but apparently, if you're a problem player and a problem organization equals good things. So hopefully for Pickens and Dallas, it works out for them. We'll see if they can come to a long-term contract soon. I think they should, but this is a move Dallas had to make. You can't trade a second or third or day 2 pick like they did last year and then just let him walk. It makes no sense, especially after the season he just had.
Right. And like I said, Pickens last year, I'm pulling up now. He's just 24 years old. So last season, he was second team All Pro and made his first career Pro Bowl. Like I said, in Pittsburgh, he never really had crazy production, but the talent jumped out on tape. But he was held back by Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky and whatever other jabronis they had under center, Russell Wilson. But in Dallas with Dak Prescott, he really took off. So, like I said, this is the right move, and we'll see what comes from it. All right. So, Lucas, we had our first trade of the offseason, our first trade since the season ended, and it's between two teams that are picking in the top four, the New York Jets and the Tennessee Titans. Of course, notable because the Titans head coach, Robert Saleh, is the former head coach of the Jets, and they basically did a player-for-player swap. The Jets traded defensive end Jermaine Johnson to the Titans, where he reunites with Saleh, and in return, they get defensive tackle Trevondre Sweat in the trade. And look, this is not a huge trade, because like I said, like both these teams are very bad, will likely be bad in 2026, although they're trying to be, less bad than they were last year. Sweat is a good player. Like, he's a better player than Jermaine Johnson is. So the Jets, I do think, won the trade in that regard. But Johnson, who really has not been the same ever since, he tore his Achilles in 2024, early that season, was not great last year. But he does get back with his former coach in Saleh. So we'll see how that goes. But like I said, it's not a very notable trade, but I do think Trevondre Sweat is an underrated player due to the fact that he plays for the Titans, or played for the Titans. So it's notable in that regard. And it's notable for the offseason.
Yeah, I like this trade for both sides. I like it a little bit more for the Jets, kind of like how you stated. Like Trevondre Sweat, I think he's a better player for his position than Jermaine Johnson. Struggled with injuries last year. He only played 380 snaps because he missed a few weeks early in the year due to an injury. But he's great against the run. He shows some juice as a pass rusher, because that was a question for him coming out of Texas in 2024. Is can he develop as a consistent pass rusher? He's 362 pounds. He's 6'4", 360. But he is a mountain of a man. I would have liked the Chiefs to at least be in on him. Like, I don't know what it would have cost. I don't know what Jermaine Johnson's value is in terms of draft capital, but I think the Jets got a very strong player. And I think also, even removing the quality of players alone, like just looking at it financially, Jermaine Johnson is currently on his fifth-year option at $13.4 million against the cap in 2026. Titans have plenty of cap space. I don't think that would have scared him off. But then Trevondre Sweat has 2 more years on his rookie contract at basically nothing. Given how the Titans paid his signing bonus, the Jets pretty much get him at cap numbers of 1.66 and 2.1 million over the next 2 years. That's basically nothing. And so if you can get 2 quality years out of him and maybe sign him to a decent extension, I think Tennessee will like that very much. I get it for both sides. Saleh gets a scheme fit, and he gets a player that is from my neck of the woods. He's from the exact same town, Eden Prairie, Minnesota, that I am from. So good luck, Jermaine Johnson in Tennessee. The Jets maybe get a potential blue chip defensive tackle in Trevondre Sweat. Blue chip, relatively speaking, strong run defender that can give him juice, but high-end starter potential in Trevondre Sweat. And then Jermaine Johnson gets to go to his scheme fit with Robert Saleh.
Right. And look, the Jets just need to improve their defense as much as possible. The Jets defense, in terms of points per game allowed, was the second worst defense in the league last year. Dallas was worse. They lost 29.6 game. For context, the Seahawks, the champs, were first. They allowed 17.2 points per game. So when you have a defensive coach and and you have a really bad defense, bad look. So the Jets, I think, are just going to try to build that side of the ball as much as they can, and try to improve that unit next year. And for the Titans, Johnson can get an opportunity to kind of like revitalize his career, because he got off to a promising start. He was good his first handful of years. Last year was probably his worst season, but he gets back with Saleh. So we'll see how that affects him, or positively affects him. All right, Lucas, our last topic, a little bit off the wall. But I think it's fair to say, and look, the season's in the books, the season's over. We're not going to like relive it again. But the 2025 season, I think it's fair to say, is one of the weirdest, wackiest, most unpredictable seasons that I can remember. It's the weirdest, because all the teams that we talked about in the offseason, or even like the early stages of the year, first half of the year, they all ended up kind of sucking. The Chiefs win 6 games. The Ravens don't make the playoffs. They go 8-9. The Bills don't even get to the conference championship in the weakest AFC really in the last, I don't know, however many years. The Eagles have a down year. Their offense struggles all year. They don't win a playoff game. The Rams fail to make the Super Bowl despite having, an MVP quarterback and, maybe the best offense in football. And the Super Bowl was a matchup between Sam Darnold and a team that nobody really expected to do anything last year, and a team that won 8 games the 2 years combined, and it was just a weird year in terms of every team that we all thought would be great was mid or worse, or still like good theoretically, but disappointed in the playoffs. And like all the teams that like won meaningful games, nobody really cared about going into the season. Nobody really talked about going into the year. At best case scenario, we thought they'd be like fringe playoff teams. Even a team like Denver, who was the 1 seed, like I thought they'd be a playoff team, but I thought they'd be like a wild card 10-7, 11-6. I didn't have them being 14-3 in the 1 seed. And let's be honest, probably winning the conference if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt. So do you think last year was just an outlier and we'll just look back and be like, what the fuck happened in 2025? Or do you think it represents a shift moving forward where, yeah, the Chiefs just aren't the class of the AFC anymore? Like the Bills will never get to a Super Bowl. The Eagles aren't that good anymore. Like, do you think it represented a shift, or do you think it's just more of a fluke?
I think, of course, like most things, I think it's somewhere in the middle, but I think the Chiefs will be back next year. I think Cincinnati might be back. I know the Bengals haven't exactly been like the class of the AFC consistently, but like with Burrow, like you would think that they would be back, but who knows, given that dumpster fire of an organization. I think it might be somewhat of a self-correction year where I think the Patriots, who they were 14-3, but like they did have a soft schedule. They were still a great team, so I'm not going to take that away from them, but like they did have a historically weak schedule. Do they kind of take a step back a little bit, and then Buffalo retakes the AFC East crown? Does Denver maybe have a slight correction year, and they maybe fall back to 11-6, and the Chiefs reclaim the crown? And then in terms of the NFC, like I thought until pretty much the NFC divisional round that the Seahawks were like not a real 1 seed. I don't really view them as like some fluke Super Bowl winner. Like we were comparing this year to 2021 where we had 2 4 seeds in the Super Bowl, and then it turns out it was just the 1 seed versus a 2 seed, which is an average Super Bowl matchup.
Right.
I think
but it was 2 teams with like mediocre preseason expectations, is what I meant. Yeah.
Exactly. But like I think the biggest key for the 2025 season was not the key, but it was really kind of a return to having complete rosters more than anything and being well coached. Like for a few years, it was all about having the best quarterback. Like the Chiefs, they had Mahomes, so they were going to be in the Super Bowl. Bills had Josh Allen, they were going to be in the divisional round or the AFC Championship. Bengals had Joe Burrow, they were going to be in the AFC Championship game. The Baltimore Ravens had Lamar Jackson, they were going to be a top 2 seed, probably be in the divisional round or conference championship. But we really saw it was the teams who were more complete. Like the Patriots, I don't think were that good, so you could say they drew an inside straight. But like they had a pretty complete team. They were well coached on both sides of the ball. Seattle didn't have an elite quarterback in Sam Darnold, a good quarterback in Darnold, but kind of a complete roster. I think we might see teams start to correct, saying it's not all about going all in on the quarterback. We might need to actually put a complete team around him. And I think the Chiefs hopefully are going to learn that lesson. Like, hey, we need to actually put a good quality supporting cast around Mahomes. We can't just let Mahomes do what he wants, like, because that's not fair to him. And I think hopefully Buffalo, for Bills fans' sake, learn that lesson. But I do think next year we're going to get back to the quote unquote the establishment. I do think the Chiefs will be back. I think Buffalo will be competing for a Super Bowl again. I don't think they'll be a 6 seed. I think they'll probably be a much better team they were last year. Cincinnati, they have to get back into the playoffs at some point. And in terms of the NFC, we'll see what the Eagles do. They tended to seesaw under Nick Sirianni. Like they were really good they were strong in 2022, shit show in 2023 at the end. 2024, we know what happened that year. 2025, they were a shit show at the end. We'll see if the Eagles bounce back next year, but I'm going to say I don't think we're going to get another weird Super Bowl matchup next year. It's easy to say at this point, but I think one of the big guys from the AFC, Allen, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, or Mahomes, will be in the Super Bowl next year. And then Seattle, or then the NFC, well, I don't know. I don't think Seattle's going to be as strong next year. We'll see if Mike McDonald can handle a Super Bowl hangover. But I think we're going to get back to quote unquote normal next year. And I think we'll see at least one establishment team in the Super Bowl.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Because, like I said, this season was very, even like in terms of like the awards, like who the hell had 37-year-old Matthew Stafford, who sat out the entire training camp with a back injury, winning the MVP this year and throwing 46 touchdowns, So it was just a season that nobody really saw coming. Nobody really predicted correctly. And we'll see if 2026 is kind of a revert to the norm. Then we'll see what happens. Obviously it's a ways away, but I just think it's worth talking about, because I was thinking, like, what was the cause of last season going the way it did? And I just think it was the front offices, and particularly the AFC, really just being complacent with their, oh, we have elite quarterbacks, we'll break through this year, and it bit them in the ass. I mean, obviously Burrow got hurt for the Bengals, which kind of submarined their year. But like the Ravens and the Chiefs really just kind of learned the hard way. And then the Bills, like, while they did make the playoffs, it didn't end well for them. And I just think people realize like how weak that roster was for most of the year last season. So, like I said, we'll see what happens. Hopefully those teams learn their lessons, and we'll see how the 2026 season goes. But Lucas and I will be here throughout the entirety of the offseason, previewing it, starting with the draft. I feel like the draft is like the official kind of like shift to the new season, where rosters are being finalized. But until then, we'll be back next week to discuss, to kind of preview free agency, to see what happens there. We'll discuss any new trades if they happen between now and then. But until then, Lucas, do you have any parting thoughts before we leave?
I do not. I love doing mock drafts. So when I saw this on the agenda, I was very excited. Hopefully we do one very soon, maybe immediately post free agency. But yeah, I can't wait for the off season. I just love it, because when every sports fan kind of imagine themselves in some sort of way in sports, like let's just take football. They either imagine they're the star quarterback or the star wide receiver or the head coach. I kind of see myself as a GM. So if I were to magically like make myself really good at one thing, realistically, it would probably be a GM. So I just love the offseason. These teams making moves to try and get back to the playoffs, get to the Super Bowl, or position themselves long term. So Super Bowls are won over the next 2 months. They're not won in November or December or January or February. They're actually won in March and April, because that's when 95% of the roster is made up, is in these next 2 months. So I cannot wait.
Yes, I can't wait either to see how it all shakes out. And Lucas and I will be here to react to it all. But until then, we'll see you next week. Thanks.